Hello and welcome back. Hi, hope you're okay. Hope you're having a good December. It is Vlogmas. I'm no longer entirely sure what day it is, but I thought I'd do the Ask Me Anything episode today. I can see my camera wobbling on the tripod, so I'm going to try and sort that out and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I have a cup of Bailey's in hand, Bailey's hot chocolate, and I have the questions that you want to ask me. There are only a few, so it shouldn't take too long, but I thought I might knit on my Land of Sweets cowl at the same time. This is as far as I've got. It's just the ribbing, and this is the 12-day advent that I was given, that was put together just for me last year by Emma and her daughter. So I'm really pleased to be working on this finally. Let me just see where I'm at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh, I'm on the second bit. Right, so for a few videos ago I asked if any of you had any questions for me. I've got a few new subscribers. Thank you so much everyone who's hit subscribe recently. It's just a bit bananas to me. And there were only a couple, and they mostly revolved around how I started the yarn dyeing business, why I packed it up, you know, how you go from running a yarn shop to being a preschool teacher. So I think I'll start first of all with, I'll start with a making one. Favourite thing to knit and why? So this is quite tricky. If you went via frequency, then my favourite thing to knit would undoubtedly be socks. They are simple, they show off yarn beautifully, they are portable, they're easily accessible. You can do them whatever state of mind you're in. It doesn't matter how tired you are, or they're great for doing watching the telly, in the cinema, on dog walks. So versatility, socks would then arguably be my favourite thing to knit. But the things that get me excited to knit, which ironically I don't knit terribly often. Hold on, Magnus. My dog has just jumped off the bed and made it all wobble. The things that get me the most excited are things like cables, cable knitting. I absolutely love. But I don't knit them terribly often, I suppose, because you need more brain space and time, and to be awake. Yeah, being awake helps. So they're not just a reach for a make. My favourite thing to crochet is hands down a granny square blanket. I always used to have one on the go. I just think they're the best thing in the world. My favourite thing that I would like to make, there's another question, are beautiful, beautiful lace shawls. I am fascinated by Shetland lace, Estonian lace. One of my friends, Brona, is a fantastic lace designer. Even before I met her, or when I met her, I got a little bit starstruck actually, because I'd been tearing out patterns of hers from the Knitter and other magazines for years. And then I met her and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of your patterns that I have never ever knit. I don't think I've knit any of her patterns yet still, which is mad because I've got so many of them. But anyway, so there you go, there's my answer. So how did I start the yarn dyeing business? Well, hang on, let me get comfy. This isn't comfy. I look jaunty. I'm not really jaunty. I'm not a jaunty sort of person. I started it because when I was expecting my daughter, I wanted a job. I was in a position where I needed to leave teaching. I was burnt out, I was exhausted, and I wanted to focus on my family. And I wanted a job where I could work around my daughter. So my plan was to build it up over maternity leave, and then hopefully after a year or so have something that I can actually really run with. And I knew I loved teaching, because teaching's all I ever wanted to do, as I've said. It was my absolute dream from when I was tiny. And so I started teaching, or I planned to start teaching knitting and crochet classes. My first classes were booked for March 2018. So I made the decision to leave teaching in the January when I was expecting my daughter. And then in the February found out that she was going to be born very, very prematurely. I had a positive fibronectin test, and fibronectin is a protein that was released, produced by the body or released by the amniotic sac, something like that, only within 2 weeks of active labour and delivery. And I was 5 months pregnant. It was very, very early. yeah, so I found myself in hospital, etc. Um, and she was born at 25 plus 6, so yeah, about 15 weeks early. She was amazing. She was feisty. She was getting me in so much trouble. She kept turning her own head. She turned herself over at 2 weeks old. She was incredible. And I know any first time mum will say that about their child, but she was pretty special. Unfortunately, she didn't get to come home with us. All I'm going to say on the matter is she should still be here. Take from that what you will. But nevertheless, there I was with my teaching career behind me, this fledgling business that I had started and then had to put on pause when I went into hospital, and no baby. And so after a bit of soul searching, I thought, well, hopefully I will be, because I'd been off sick for a while as well with teaching. I was off sick with exhaustion and depression. And after having been off for a few months, I found that's when I fell pregnant as well. And we'd been trying for years with unexplained infertility. So I thought, well, I don't think I really want to go back to the classroom. I did for a while. I did in the September. I started as a supply teacher, but I was teaching books that were, featured babies in hospitals and things, and it was just too much. I couldn't do it anymore. So yeah, but in the meantime, I thought, I started this business for my family, for my daughter. I'm going to carry it on in her name and see if I can't make a difference somehow. I released a knitting pattern for knitting socks, Lara's Legacy Socks, which raised over £1,000 for Bliss, which is the charity for the newborn. I taught my classes. My students hung on for me. My students hung on from the March, had been booked on until the September when I was ready to start teaching them. And so that's how the Project Bab was born. In terms of getting into yarn tying, there's a funny story. When I was off sick, I discovered knitting podcasts on YouTube. I was very, very ill. I wasn't really able to do anything or function or think or talk to anyone. I wasn't very well at all. But I discovered Tea and Possibilities podcast on YouTube, which was Nikki. And she's only a new podcaster then. She hadn't been podcasting for very long. So when I ran out of her videos, I tried Jude's because Nikki was a friend of Jude and has mentioned him so often during her podcast. I thought, well, I'll have to check this person out. And so then I ended up watching Stranded Dyeworks podcasts and discovered the world of hand dyeing and hand dyers, and I bought my first hand dyed yarn from Truly Hooked from Verity, who's become a friend. She actually dedicated a pattern in her second sock book to Lara and made a donation to the charity and included a link for donations, which is just incredible. And through that I watched other podcasts, and I was thinking about getting into dyeing yarn. I wanted to give it a go. And I remembered that at the yarn dispensary, it all links up, where I'd been as a visitor the year before, the then manager, which was still manager at this point, the manager had said about going to Chester Wool Company's open weekend. And I knew they were the yarn the undyed yarn providers. And I thought the open weekend. So I Googled it. I Googled Chester Wool Company open weekend 2018. And I got the dates and I thought, right, I spoke to my husband. I said, I'm going to go and have a look at this yarn in person and see a bit about it, see if I can buy some and give it a go. I was going to play on doing it for fun. I was already selling project bags and teaching classes. He's like, yeah, go. So anyway, I was watching Ellie of Skein Dear Knits. This is a very long story. I hope you've got a cuppa. Podcast, and she was talking about going to Perth Festival of Yarn in September. It does all link, I promise. And my husband, who I hadn't realised was paying any attention at all, said, hey, you're away in September already. Why don't you go? That's the next weekend. Why don't you drive up, stay with your dad, visit your dad for a bit and go to this yarn festival? I was like, what? He's like, yeah, it'd be good for you. Get, see a bit more about it all. And, it's only the next weekend. Why don't you go? I was like, oh, okay. So, yeah, I spoke to my dad, who lives in Scotland. and made the arrangements, booked tickets to go as a visitor. Mentioned on my podcast, which I started my podcast in August, that I was planning on going to Perth Festival of Yarn. I was really excited. And the director, Eva, reached out to me and said, come and introduce yourself. So I went to Chester at Wool opening weekend. Google had taken off the 2018. There wasn't one that year. It was 2017. It had done that thing where it crosses out part of your result that isn't relevant or they couldn't find. And I felt really silly then. I was like, I've come all this way. I've spent this money on an Airbnb, a B&B. I stayed in a lovely B&B in Wales. I felt really awful. And my husband was like, don't worry. It's not a wasted trip. Go on, why don't you go up to Scotland still, have fun. So I drove up and I was sat in my dad's garden, and I think it was the Thursday, and I was watching Jude's podcast, and he mentioned he was going to Perth Festival of Yarn and that he was meant to be going to the gym flight night, but he didn't know if he could get there in time from Edinburgh Airport when he landed on the Friday. And I don't know what possessed me to do this. I've got absolutely no idea what possessed me to do this, but I emailed him. And I said, hello, you don't know me from Adam. I don't know if you even know an Adam, but I'm not Adam. However, this is who I am. This is a business, and the director has messaged me and seems to think I'm okay. And I said, and either way, you've got sharp things in your bag you can stab me with if need be. Would you like a lift? And to my absolute surprise, emailed back and went, yes, please. And it turns out he'd spoken to his mum Mary, and she'd said pretty much the same thing. You know, you've got sharp knitting needles in your bag, you'll be fine if it's a weirdo. So I found myself very nervously waiting to pick Jude up from the airport, and I took him to his hotel. And then he said, well, what are you up to next? As we ended up going for dinner. And the rest, as they say, is history. We are firm friends. I say that, he did push me off the cliff, because I was talking to him, we were chatting, and I said about this undyed yarn that I was going to have a go. And on his next podcast, he mentioned that I dyed yarn, and it had been sat in the boot of the car since September. I thought, oh God, now I've got to give it a go, haven't I? So I pulled my big girl pants on and started dyeing yarn, and oh my gosh, I loved it. My first one was an absolute disaster. I was going for a kind of pumpkin spice latte concoction, and what came out was horrible, I thought. And my husband was like, oh, that looks nice. I was like, no, it doesn't. It's like some sort of grubby goldfish. And that became my best known and one of my best selling yarns. Until I released Babbacombe Beach, and that, or Babbacombe Bay, I think I've called it, and that has become my bestseller, but there we are. So that is how the project bag started. That is how I started dyeing yarn. And the rest, as they say, is history. Then in 2019, so fast forward a couple of months, I had left supply teaching. So I started supply teaching for a bit, but I realised I couldn't do it. And I'd left without anything to go to. And I was at knit night, and one of the ladies there said, oh, the yarn dispensary is looking for a temporary manager. And I don't get the newsletter, but she did, and she showed me. And I fired off an email. I'm looking back, I can't believe that I was ever bold enough to do this, because it's so out of character for me. But I guess my daughter empowered me. She was spunky and feisty, and I have got absolutely no doubt would have grabbed life by the horns, shall we say, and absolutely got everything there was to get out of it. And I'd made a promise to live for her. And so there we go. I emailed the directors of the yarn dispensary, and I got a response back very quickly. I was interviewed on April Fool's Day 2019, and I started on April the 2nd. And I text Jude a picture of my outfit. I was like, what do you think? He's like, yep, you look great, you've got this, don't worry, you've got this. And I didn't tell him what job I was going for, because I was too nervous. I didn't want anyone to know. And then I texted him, I said, I've got it. He's like, it's the yarn shop, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it is. So yeah, I started on the 2nd of April, and it was just magical. So the yarn shop wasn't mine. It's owned by John and Vanessa, and they set it up, and their niece-in-law was managing it for them from 2015 to 2019, where unfortunately through ill health, she had to retire. So it wasn't planned. And unfortunately, through a series of unfortunate events, I was available and could do it, if that makes sense. So, I mean, if either of us were treading the paths we'd wanted to, we wouldn't be in this situation. She'd still be running it, I guess, and I wouldn't. But there we are. And so I started at the yarn dispensary, and it was magical. It was the most wonderful 4 years. It was utterly, utterly brilliant. And then we got locked down. So I'm moving on to the next question, which is, how do you go from being a yarn dyer and a yarn shop manager to a preschool teacher? Here we are. We're in that stage of the story now. So, as I said, I had the most wonderful time. It was brilliant. It was hard work, but I loved it. I lived, ate, breathed, slept, dreamt it. It was everything. And the shop is such a huge part of the community, and it does so much. It's so much more than a yarn shop, you know. We offered tea and a listening ear, and, you know, it was a haven. It really was. It really is something special. I say was. It is. It is something special. The new manager, Helen's incredible. She was a good friend of mine as well, and I'm really delighted that she's the one that took over from me. I'm skipping ahead. So we got locked down, and we got up again. We got locked down, and we got up again, and we got locked. And just as we're about to reopen in April, I think it was April, I was allowed to. Yeah, April. We've been told. March, we've been told that we would probably be allowed to reopen in the April, at least temporarily, or so. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm getting myself in a muddle. But I found out I was expecting my son. So once again, I'd been off work for a period of months because of lockdown. So yeah, this was April 2021, we were going to be allowed to reopen. So we've been locked down for a while again. Locked down for about 3 months again, from Christmas through to March, I think. I don't know. You could correct me in the comments. Doesn't really matter. Either way, found out I was expecting my son, Robin. So clearly my infertility was related to work. I can't work and be a mum, apparently. And so we'd just been told we were allowed to kind of reopen again, and it was a Sunday. And I found out I was expecting my son and rang my boss on a Sunday, and they were, you know, reading their morning papers. And John said, when he saw who it was ringing, she's pregnant. And then Vanessa went, oh, don't be silly. I answered the phone and I went, oh, I'm so sorry. Because, of course, it's the last bit of news you want when you're trying to bring your business back up after a pandemic. And yeah, for me to go, hey, I'm not going to be around much. So anyway, Robin came into the world in November 21 and carried on, as I say, running the business. Went back to work in the March. He came with me. It was lovely having him toddle around the shop, and my boss was so supportive. She used to turn up at lunchtime, and I thought, oh my God, you're always turning up just as I'm, you know, trying to feed the baby and or trying to grab a sandwich for myself, and it looks really unprofessional. It took me a while to work out, bless her, she was actually turning up at lunchtime because she wanted to feed the baby and to make sure that I'd had something to eat. How amazing is that? She's just so wonderful. Honestly, she's the most wonderful person. So we didn't have any support, any family support in Kent, because my family are in Essex, my husband's family are in Devon. My family's Essex and Scotland, to be fair. And I jokingly said to my husband, we're fine unless one of us breaks a bone. And then I got COVID in 22 and cracked a rib. I coughed so hard I cracked a rib, and I had a baby who wasn't walking, and ended up having to do a hostage exchange at Amesbury Services down here in the southwest, because my in-laws couldn't take any time off to come up to help, and my husband couldn't take any time off to look after me either. So we ended up being taken halfway by my husband, who then dispatched me and the dog and the baby into his mum and her partner's care, and ended up there. And we talked about it for a while, and we realised that where we were in life, moving to Devon would be the right thing, to move nearer to family. I was burning out again. I wasn't able to give the business, the yarn shop, everything it needed, because I'd run out. I didn't have a lot of business experience. Everything I'd learned, I kind of learned on the job. And we got through some tough times that came before the pandemic. We got through the pandemic, and now we're entering a recession and a cost of living crisis. And I'd run out. I'd run out of gas, I'd run out of skills, and I knew that while I still had a small baby, I couldn't give that business everything it needed, and it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to John and Vanessa, it wasn't fair to my family, it wasn't fair to the community. And we were in the position where our mortgage, we could take it with us, which meant we could move. And so we did. We made the massive decision to move down to Devon, and we landed here. So we made the decision in October 2023, and in August of 2020, so we set the ball rolling straight away. House went on the market in the December. I told my bosses first, told them as soon as I made the decision. So I had the best part of a year's notice. And we found a house. My in-laws found it for us. We hadn't actually seen it when we bought it, but it's a good house. And in August 2024, we landed down here. And I had no idea what I was going to do. My yarn dyeing business had kind of taken a back seat because I was struggling to do baby and yarn shop and yarn dyeing. And I needed to put everything into the yarn shop because ultimately that was what was paying the bills. So there's that. And I wasn't sure. When we moved down here, the plan initially was to build the dye studio and carry on. But then obviously the cost of living crisis was having an impact. It was having an impact on all dyers. Dyers who've been around for donkey's years and set up really solid businesses that were supporting their whole families were having to close. And I thought, do I want this? Do I really want to be hustling? And I decided I didn't. I didn't want to be trying to build up this business, because although I'd had it for a few years, because I'd focused on the yarn shop, my own business wasn't, it wasn't where it could have been. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't where it could have been. And I just thought to myself, no, I don't want that right now. I don't want to be hustling. I want to be enjoying the fact that I've got this little boy and we're building this family life. And that's where I'm at. I still love yarn dyeing, absolutely. And I had a few things still going on. I had this advent calendar that Lee wanted me to dye. Mina, the knitting expert, had asked me to support her at Yarningham Festival. I had actually been invited to vend at Yarningham, but I knew I wouldn't be up and running properly by then. So I dyed exclusive kits for Mina. And actually there are still some. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to sell these. But anyway, Mina's got them. If you want them, drop us a message on Instagram. There you go. So we've got some kits for her patterns here. And that's it. I've wrapped it up. The preschool teacher thing was purely by accident, to be honest with you. As I said, I used to be a teacher. The manager of my son's setting in Kent suggested I might consider retraining as an early years teacher. She said she reckoned I'd be good. And then we were looking for a preschool or a nursery to send my son to, because he was desperate for the company of other children. He's such a sociable boy. And we tried going to classes and groups, and I just wasn't managing to get anywhere with mums locally. I wasn't managing to set up play dates or anything like that. And I thought to myself, he needs to be in a nursery or preschool. So we were working with, my husband was working part-time and I was working part-time in a tea room. And I loved it. I also work for Search Press, so I represent them and look after their retailers who sell their books here in the Southwest. So I was doing a couple of different jobs, and it was fine, but we needed to find a setting. And we looked at a few, and I thought, we got a place in one. I thought something doesn't feel quite right. And then we went to this last one, which had been recommended to us, and it was perfect. We knew as soon as we walked in, this was the place where we wanted to send our son. So I was really, really excited, and rang up to get him in, set up about enrolling him, and I didn't hear anything. I was like, that's weird. Why haven't I heard anything? Because it had been a week or more. And then I had a phone call, and it was them following up, and I said, yeah, this is really bizarre. I've left you messages wanting to book on, but no one's called me back. And they said, oh, we were closed last week. And I was like, oh, why are you? Oh. And it hadn't been mentioned that they were term time only, and obviously working in a tea room and a tourist resort, tourist attraction, I could not be off during the holidays. That was the key time I needed childcare. I was like, oh no. As it happened, they had some vacancies. And again, look at me with my big girl pants. I threw my hat in the ring. I said, can I apply? I said, I'm a fully qualified teacher, albeit for secondary. I was considering retraining, albeit not yet. I was thinking about waiting until my son went to school. But can I apply? and I applied. And we both started at preschool on the same day in April 2024. So it's worked out brilliantly. I'm doing my teacher training because although I'm a qualified teacher, I'm qualified from ages 11 to 19. Technically, I could teach the key stage below as well, but early years is a separate qualification. So from birth to 5 is a completely separate qualification, understandably, because it's all about effectively child rearing. So I've started that. I'm doing that teacher training and I'm doing that part-time. I get my weekends and holidays with my boys and life's pretty good. And I think that's all the questions. Yeah, that's it. So there you go. You've got the whole story now. I hope you found that interesting. If you are interested in buying any of these remaining kits, it's the last chance you got to get your hands on my hand-dyed yarn, then please let me know. And yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this. And if you do have any other questions, let me know. All right, I'm going to stop saying let me know and I'll say take care. Bye.